All right, everybody, it is Tuesday night. It is time for another Conversations with Commodores. And we got number 12 talking to number 12 tonight. We got Fred Fisher, who quarterbacked us 72-75, including one of the bowl game years. And we're going to get into all that. Fred, thank you for having some time for us tonight. It's been so great getting to connect in the last couple of weeks. And I'm really, really thankful you're here and looking forward to our conversation tonight.
Bernard, I'm looking forward to it as well. It's funny how I got to you. I guess we start off with a little quick story. Your cousin Lisa down there, and Jimmy, my wife and I were down in the Panhandle there outside of Panama City having dinner one night. All of a sudden, a group of about 8 people came in having the best times of their lives, and sure enough, Lisa and Jimmy were celebrating their anniversary.
Mhm.
And we were at the table next to him, and I struck up with Jimmy. I said, "Where'd you go to school?" He said, "Alabama." So he's a big Bama fan. And all of a sudden, Lisa's talking to my wife and myself. We're sitting at one of those high top tables, and she came up and we started talking and everything. And all of a sudden, we started somehow got around and found out she went to Vanderbilt as well. Your cousin did.
And I want to say maybe did y'all have 1 year, maybe in 75? I can't
She
remember.
was, I think she was in my wife's class. She was finished up in, well, I graduated in 76. So I think Lisa was probably finished in 77. I think that was, if she's listening, she could correct me, but I believe that was right. I think they were about the same age. And I mean, it was like old hometown. You know, we just had a great time and visited with them. She gave us a little champagne with them, and we've been in touch ever since. Been down in Panama City and had lunch with them, and just enjoyed seeing the marina, beautiful marina. And I know
Yeah.
they're working after a couple of hurricanes. It's very unfortunate, but they're getting everything back together. And the funny thing that started that was when I remember we went to Panama City.
Mhm.
Our boys were probably about 5 and 2, I guess. Maybe no, they're a little bit older. They were about 7 and 4.
Mhm.
And we went to have dinner at a restaurant. I told her, I said, the only place I've ever been in Panama City, I went to this place that looked like a ship. And she went, "That's my dad's place," the restaurant.
Yeah.
And it was great. We had such a wonderful time, and we really enjoyed. They're really fine people. I know you love them a lot, and they're really very very kind people. Barbara and I really enjoy getting to know them.
Well, that's so cool. And I do love my cousins, and it was just so cool that Lisa told me of the connection a few weeks ago, and it's led us here. And it doesn't matter to me how Commodores find our program; they find us, and we're telling the oral history of the program, one conversation at a time. And Fred, your years, I know that you had three different coaches, but you also had a bowl season in there. And where I want to start about that is the 75 season. You guys won 7 games, but no bowl.
No, we didn't.
I
We
assume
didn't.
that way predated the 6 games to be eligible rule. But I don't mean to start on a sour or a bad memory, but
No.
what was it about a 7-win season that didn't get us to a bowl?
Well, we started off the year pretty well. We always opened up the UT Chattanooga, the Mocs,
Hmm.
beat them. Then we went down, and I missed the game. I had surgery before the season started in the spring on my knee, which I originally had injured back in my sophomore year. Just didn't know about it. They didn't have all the technology they have now. I tore a cartilage, and I guess it just got worse and worse. And finally, they did surgery going into my senior year in May. But what happened was I missed that, and in that Tennessee Chattanooga game, you'll love this one. I was being a quarterback. A guy tackled me. We were running the veer. Guy tackled me, and I was on the ground, and he was twisting my knee. I had surgery on,
Mm.
so I had my other leg free, and I kicked him in the helmet and trying to get him off of me. Referee threw a flag and went, "Oh, that's great. The referee's going to penalize him." I'm standing on the sidelines with Coach Pancoast. We're waiting for a play, and I realized that referee's walking over. I think the penalty was on me for kicking the guy. So I kept telling Coach Pancoast, "Give me a play. I need a play. I need to get back in." And he asked the referee what happened. He says number 12 right there, kicked this guy in the helmet. So I had the 15-yard penalty against me. But anyways, we won that game, and then we went down and beat Rice.
Mhm.
Um, got beaten pretty bad by Alabama. They came back, and then we played Tulane in the Superdome. Wound up winning that game. So we were right after the Tulane game. I was pretty beaten up, and I missed about 3 or 4 games. I guess that time we were 3-1, and then we wound up. We had a tough stretch. We played Florida. We beat Florida in '74, and then went to Gainesville in '75 that year, and they were ready for us. They were tough. Then we
Yeah,
lost
that wasn't a
also.
close one.
No, and then we lost to Georgia. That was another not very good, and then we lost to Ole Miss.
Well, I
And
think
then we
that was Georgia's way of saying, "Hey, y'all beat us 2 years ago, but we got to get you back."
That was my sophomore year. That's right. And then we wound up coming back, and let's see, we wound up playing Virginia,
Mhm.
Army,
Kentucky, then Army.
Kentucky, then Army, and
Mhm.
then beat Tennessee in Neyland Stadium and beat them 17-14. And by the way,
Yeah,
got it up here in my wife's, I'm in her office right
I
here,
see
up
it.
above
I
is a
see it.
football. That was the last, we ran a quarterback sneak, ran back for about 3 seconds, as long as 3 seconds ever of my life, but held onto the ball,
Mhm.
stuck it up under my jersey, and it's up there now.
And that didn't help your rushing yards per average, did it?
No, that's all right. I didn't have to worry about that one. But anyways, yeah, right, Bernard. They just didn't have many bowl games back then. We started off fine. We had a great defense that year. Our defense was fantastic. I mean, we
Mhm.
had some really stalwart guys that just
Wasn't
played.
Dennis Harrison? Wasn't he one of the
Harrison, you had
good
Harrison,
players?
had Tom Galbeers, Tate Rich,
Mhm.
Damon Region, Paul Brogdon, Joe Reynolds.
Mhm.
Golly, let's see who else we had. Mark Adams, linebacker. I hope I'm not leaving some of my guys out. Mickey Jacobs. We also had in the secondary one of the toughest guys in the SEC, Jay Chesley.
Yeah, and
Had Ed
Reggie
Oaks.
Calvin.
Yeah, Ed Oaks, and
Mhm.
let's see, Bernard Wilson,
Mhm.
Reggie Calvin. I mean, they were all, Steve Canute. So I
Mhm.
mean, they were all really played so hard and well together, and we had an excellent defense. That's what helped us to get to be 7-4.
But unlike today, where there's 41 bowl games, there was only
Oh,
a dozen to 15 back in the day.
yeah.
Now it seems like every state has their own bowl, and just I can't keep up with the names. I loved back in the day the Peach Bowl, the Tangerine Bowl, the Orange Bowl, and now it's the somebody sponsors by the somebody name bowl.
You
But
know, it's really funny, Bernard. Every time they put it on the bulletin board, that I remember every year that we in our first game, we get a postcard. It's from the Sun Bowl.
Mhm.
There'd be a guy out there, like some older guy, looking out of binoculars, and these girls in bikinis, and it says, "We hope to see you at the Sun Bowl this year." We all said, "Man, we got to get to that one. That looks like a pretty good bowl game."
Yeah,
But
even
yeah,
though
you're
it's
right. You're right. It's going to be interesting to see how the bowl games play out, especially with this playoff system now, as how, how that's going to work, or even I guess it's all money, TV money, and driven by revenue.
Of course, everything's driven by money and revenue. But I will say this, Fred, selfishly, I live about 6 miles from Protective Stadium downtown in Birmingham. It did not upset me to know that my hometown is hosting the Commodores in a few
That's
weeks.
right. It should be a good ball game. Georgia Tech's got a really good team. Vanderbilt, I think it's going to be a really good matchup. Really do.
I think you're right, and who knows what's going to happen. I hate we're even talking about this about who's going to put themselves in the transfer portal over these couple of weeks. I did see, and this is kind of getting off topic, but Georgia Tech's main wide receiver is now in the portal, and I don't think he's going to be available for the game.
Wow.
But
Yeah, and that's the
who
thing. That's the same thing too. As I've seen, if you know, unless you're in the playoffs, a
mhm.
lot of times these guys go to bowl games and just say, "Well, I don't want to get hurt. I'm sitting out. I think I might get drafted or whatever." And you just hate to see that.
Well, it's interesting, and I haven't read too much into it yet, but I did see that SMU's quarterback, who accumulated like 4,500 yards, 40 touchdowns, is supposedly going into the transfer portal. I,
Huh?
yes,
I
I don't
guess
know what
what
all.
I think I know he's doing. He just sees SMU. They've had a great year, and it's maybe not a one-off, but they've had a great year, and he's probably trying to get to somebody like an Ohio State or Alabama or
And
big time Power Five.
you may be spot on about that. But let's jump back even further about growing up in Nashville and MBA and what was life like as a middle schooler or high schooler in your sports? Were you a man of all each season or just football?
No, I did it all. I loved it. It was always football, basketball, and baseball. And it's funny. I remember back when my parents didn't want me to play football till at least I was in the seventh grade. And I was ready for tryouts at Burton School here in Nashville. It's not here anymore, but it's I was going to try out, and my friend wanted to play quarterback, and I said, well, I'll just try out for running back.
Mhm.
Well, my mother, believe it or not, knew I wanted to play quarterback really bad, so she called the coach and said, "Hey, you need to see if Fred wants to play quarterback. You might want to try him out there." And I
Mhm.
guess the rest is history. So I stayed there and then went to MBA as a freshman,
Mhm.
and uh, it was quite an experience. I mean, it was a great experience, but it was also a difficult one from the standpoint of being prepared to be able to get into the scholastic level at MBA. And it took me a while to catch up,
Mhm.
truthfully. And it was tough, but it was one of the greatest gifts my parents gave to me when I was going through
Well,
school.
I was going to say, I'm not trying to jump ahead, but did it help prepare you for academics at Vanderbilt?
Oh yes, by all means, it helped the studying and just teaching you how to study, and also the just the quality of the education and the teachers was something that just it was fantastic, and it was really a blessing to have by all means. But I went over there as a freshman, and Coach Owen was our football coach, Tommy Owen. He was great, just a great mentor and a great coach, and I was fortunate enough to play on the varsity as a freshman. And what I did, I've mentioned to you a little bit earlier, is I actually ran other teams' plays against our varsity, and our varsity was undefeated. That we were AAA, which was the highest level, and was undefeated and won the state that year. And I learned how to get quicker, and also learned how to get rid of the ball a lot quicker, especially with the defense we had. But Coach Owen protected me pretty well, and it was
Well,
great. We won the state. Then
mhm.
my sophomore year, we sort of rebounded to a 2-8 year. That was not very good. And
Well, you probably had a lot of kids graduate off who were big contributors as seniors.
they did, and then let's see, my junior year we were 10-0-1 and won the Clinic Bowl, and then my senior year we were 10-0, ranked number one in the state all year long.
Mhm.
We played Father Ryan was a Catholic school here. We were all boys school, and they'd gone co-ed at that time. But we were 9-0, and they were 9-0 going in the last game. And we were originally supposed to play at West End Junior High, and their headmaster called our headmaster and said, "Hey, do you mind if we move this game to Vanderbilt?" He said, "Hey, that's fine. That sounds good." So we went down there, and believe it or not, at that game there were 26,000 people that showed up for that high school game, and fortunately we wound up winning 24-3. And then we got beat in the first round of the playoffs. So those things happen, I guess. But at NBA, I played football, baseball, basketball, and enjoyed all the sports.
And I know most of you who watching tonight or will watch later, you know that geographically MBA is even closer to the Vanderbilt campus than I am to Protective. It can't be 4 miles, 3 miles at the most. You just drive over 440 and you're virtually there.
Probably
So
closer to about 2 miles,
yeah, two,
probably.
2 miles. I guess if you
Yeah,
get lost, you can get it to
that's
4.
right.
But I guess what I want to ask about that, during your years at MBA, was there any sort of an athletic pipeline for any sport, basketball, baseball, football, whatever, to come over to Vanderbilt, or was it not necessarily that popular?
But I tell you, it was between two schools. We had a lot of guys that you had Bill Blair, you had Bill Husband, Hunter Husband, uh, also Mike Denson, that was from NBA that signed to play at Alabama. They all the Alabama was pretty much a feeder school, as well as Vanderbilt. You had several guys go down there. Jeff Peoples was one. There was a tremendous athlete that went down before us to Vanderbilt, and it was there were a lot of back then we had maybe I'm trying to think. We probably had maybe 69 to 70 students, seniors, when I graduated.
Mhm.
And out of that class, I think we had 15 to 20 that went to Vanderbilt. So
Wow.
back then it was big.
Yeah.
Nowadays, maybe you have one, maybe
Mhm.
one or two that might go there. So it
And And I think there's a small handful of guys on the current roster or have been in the last few years. Not a big number, but I know that Clark has done a conscientious job of trying to recruit some of those kids, particularly the Nashville area athletes. But I want to take you to maybe your freshman year in high school. Was that 69 or was that 70?
It was freshman year started in 68, so 68 to 69.
Okay, so the fall of your sophomore year, Vanderbilt defeats Alabama at home with Watson Brown, Christy Houck. The names go on and on. And I don't know if it's legend, lore, or the truth that at some point Coach Bryant came to the locker room and congratulated the team. And I think at some point he was interviewed and said that this was either the very darkest of days or a very dark day in Alabama football history. But be that as it may, local heroes were made that night. Did you happen to be at that game or do you remember that time period?
Yes, I do. I was not at the game, but I watched it,
Mhm,
and I do remember the week before.
mhm,
Scott Hunter was a quarterback for Alabama,
mhm.
and they beat Ole Miss with Archie Manning. It
Oh,
was
I
a
didn't know that
wild
was the game
shootout.
before. I didn't realize
Yes,
that. I
that
know
was
that game.
yes, it was I think it was at Legion Field,
Hmm.
and it was the wildest game. And I thought, oh man, Vanderbilt's in for trouble. I
Hmm.
was thinking that, and
Hmm.
sure enough, Watson, what a great player he was. And West End, Denny Painter,
Hmm.
also quarterback. He and Watson both quarterbacked in that game and won. And yeah, I could see Coach Bryant a little upset after that.
Well, I do know that Watson got hurt early in the game. Dennis came in and filled in maybe toward the last or late in the quarters. And then maybe Watson came in when it was in the what we now call the red zone. But with about maybe 8 minutes, I may have this a little bit wrong. With about 8 minutes to go, Christy Houck makes basically a game-winning or game-saving interception, and he tells a funny story. He sees the goal line at the other end of the field, so he's starting to head that way, and whoever it was on the Alabama team just leveled him. He never saw him and just leveled him. But Christy tells a very funny story about his road to glory was cut short pretty quick.
At least he made the interception.
That was the
Christie had those
important
good
part.
hands. I don't know where it was. A picture of him had these big hands. They showed
Mhm.
him, and I think it was in one of the programs. I remember Christie seeing
Oh,
that.
that's so good. But Fred, as you're matriculating through high school and you're getting your playing time and you're starting to come on the radar of schools, when did it kind of pop into your head that maybe you've got a chance to play at the next level and we're starting to really consider that?
Well, started getting contacts and so forth in my junior year, um, and having different, you know, like I said, phone calls or possibly a visit, and it started happening that way because I guess the NBA at that time we figured was a football school. It had Coach Owen had all the things that were just lining up, and only one concern I may have had was my size. I wasn't very heavy. I was usually pretty. I was about 6'1", but heaviest I ever was probably 170, which that's. I learned to get quick and know when to go down on the ground and not not stay up too long for sure.
Well,
But
you
it
got to
was
learn those survival techniques or
oh
you
yes,
won't be there long.
yes, yeah. It's the only way you can survive just about. So about that time, that's when I started to have recruiting going on, and it was fine. In fact, Tate Rich and I we went each weekend. We would go on the same trips together. We recruited, offered at UT, Georgia, Alabama, Vanderbilt, Ole Miss, and those were the schools we had interest in and going to visit and possibly be a part of.
Well, I didn't know if there was any additional in-town pressure, either by friends, family, teachers, coaches. Hey, you really need to stick at home and play for the black and gold.
It's funny you mentioned that. It really Tate and I both it came down between going to Alabama or Vanderbilt,
Mhm,
and I asked Coach Brian. I remember asking him, says, "Tell me about this wishbone."
mhm,
I said, he told me, says, "Fred, we're dedicated to the wishbone. That's what we're going to run if you come here."
mhm.
And I thought, I don't know about that, but I forgot they had John Hanna up front blocking and Tony Nathan you hand off to, that's pretty good athletes. They
Yeah,
were
they had some
pretty,
pretty decent players. And then maybe about that same time, I may be off by a year or two. Ozzie Newsome
Ozzie News,
was a
Ozzie
tight
Awesome.
end.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Ozzie
Ozzie
Awesome.
awesome.
He that was, and then but yeah, what happened was at the end of my junior year,
Mhm.
Coach Owen, who I highly respected so very much, he left NBA and went to be a backfield coach at Vanderbilt.
Well, I was gonna say with the success that your team or your school had, except for that one off year, y'all had a pretty stellar or you had a pretty stellar 4 years.
We we
So it's
did.
not surprising to learn that.
Yeah, we did, and he had the opportunity to go down, and I tell you what, he was such a smart and very intellectual, as well as understood the game of football as well, as anybody I've known. And was really, going in my senior year, I sort of hated to see him go down to
Mhm.
Vanderbilt. Not any other reason other than man, we'd love to have had him our senior year for sure. But anyways, we were at a party one night and was going through the recruiting process, and Coach Owen came up to me as Mr. Fleming's house. And people in Vanderbilt remember him, Mr. Sam Fleming's house, and in fact, Toby Wilt was there and his wife, and then also just our parents and about 5 or 6 of us from NBA.
Oh, so it wasn't a real party. It was just a get
No,
together.
it's just a
It
nice
wasn't a
dinner.
kids' party.
Yeah, a nice dinner. Yeah. So
I was going to
anyway,
say, what do you got coaches there escorting or
yeah. Well,
making
Coach
sure
Owen
y'all are
there,
good?
so we're sitting there and everything. He sort of pulls me aside and says, "Fred, don't you think it's time for you to hurry up, and go ahead and sign, commit over here, and get some of your friends to come over with you?"
Mhm.
And I think, that's a tough one right there. So
Yeah.
it worked out. Everything was great. I met us. I got married. I met Barbara, and we got married. Been married 46 years, and I came from Vanderbilt, and 2 wonderful sons, and it couldn't been better.
That's awesome. I gotta pause you, Fred. We got Kenny Cole, attorney in Huntsville and a dear friend, wants to ask you, by chance, did you know Keith Phillips, who was a 77 graduate of MBA? He then played at Vanderbilt and was in Kenny's class.
Yes, I know Keith very well. He was a little bit behind me, of course, and I also, for a while, for a few years, worked with his dad, and got to know Keith from that. And I know Keith's been in the securities business, I believe, here in Nashville over the years, and has done very well. And his son, I think his son played football. I can't remember where he played. Was it Furman, maybe? Where he played football. I think he went to NBA as well, and then went on to play at Furman. But yes, no Keith, and known him for many years.
Very, very good. Guys, just those of you who are just tuning in, I've got Fred Fisher, who's quarterback 72 to 75. And Fred, I want to talk about the transition from MBA, from high school, where you did play in front of a big crowds, 26,000 at least once, and you're now switching or moving up to the SEC, the best conference in the country year in and year out. The game is typically bigger, faster, and stronger for anybody who transitions out of high school. When did you, this is one of the questions I like to ask, is when did you feel confident that you had found your footing or your place or your abilities, you were confident again that you could succeed, not just survive, but starting to thrive a little bit in the SEC? When did the game slow down, I guess is the real question.
My freshman year, it was like being at the Indy 500. It was very fast. It was hard to pick up. It was pretty difficult. And I came in, the first game I got to play was against William and Mary over at William and Mary, and we wound up winning that game. And the first start I had was down between the hedges at Georgia. And when you come out there to warm up, and everybody's yelling dog meat, dog food, or whatever at you and barking at you, that was quite an awakening. And playing against those guys was a challenge for sure. But I would say it started slowing down my sophomore year, when Coach Sloan had come in, Steve Sloan, and what a great gentleman. He passed away this year.
Mhm.
But I would stay in touch with him, called him every few months just to see how he was doing, and just a great person and a great mentor as well. And he, what he did, he brought in abilities to read defenses that I've not had before in certain areas, and picking up the reads, watching what the safeties are doing, the linebackers, everything else. And it really helped to open up the game in college for me a whole lot better. I was able to see things a lot better. And, I would continually, it's like another class, I would continually draw up the different formations, draw up defenses we would face, draw the plays, and if somebody did this move, then I'd throw it here. And I mean, it was there was a lot of in-depth learning, as well as a lot of mental thinking and going through your mind on what you would do with the ball, when and where. Case in point, it's sort of funny. Our sophomore year, my sophomore year we were 5-6. 5-5 going to UT, and UT beat us up there that year for 17-14. But part of my deal with going to Vanderbilt was I wanted to play baseball as well. Coach Schmitto was our recruiting. He was a recruiting coordinator at Vanderbilt, but also the baseball coach. And I played summer ball on his team last year at NBA when I graduated. So, anyways, I was over there playing on my sophomore year. That was Coach Sloan's after the season. I played all 11 games in the season, but I was pretty beaten up. I thought, I need to I'm going to do baseball. And not that I wanted to miss spring and everything, but I did. And and by the way, we wound up celebrated last year, the 50th year we won the SEC that year. It's SEC in baseball in 1974. And so, anyways, we were getting ready to go to practice, and Coach Sloan said, "Hey, I want Fred to come out here. I want you to practice this drill. Come out here, the 7-on-7 type passing drill with me." And I went out there, had a helmet on, had sweatpants on from baseball, and a baseball jersey. And we were working the drills. Everything that I worked on, the reads, everything else, I had them down. Well, if you remember as a quarterback, I don't know if they had it when y'all were there. They called the coverages, they called sky coverage, cloud coverage, 5. Well, everything we always saw was sky coverage, strong safety support, or the 5 coverage with the safeties weak and strong safety on the hash marks and the corners settling, covering the flats. Well, I dropped back, and all of a sudden I saw the strong safety go back to where the weak safety was, the corner roll around. Typically, we would throw to the weak side because but since they're rolling that way, I threw to the strong side and completed the pass. And he says, "How'd you know how to do that?" I looked at Coach Sloan. I said, "I studied real hard and handed football, went over to baseball practice." So, but we had a lot of, but that's when things started to slow down for me.
Well, I was going to say, I'm looking at the 72 season, your freshman year.
Oh God, don't tell me about that.
No, I'm just talking about the crowd size.
Oh, okay.
First game, UT Chattanooga, 19-5. Next game, Mississippi State, 21,000. Then you go to Tuscaloosa, 56,000. Then you come home, Virginia, 17,000. These are small crowds at home. You go to William and Mary, and it may be the smallest crowd you've ever played in. It was 13,000 people.
Yeah.
But then I think you said your first start is Georgia, your freshman year, 58,000.
Yeah.
So the crowds, well, some of these crowds were small, like Tulane was 10,000, Tampa was 11,000, but the crowds were never 100,000 back in the day.
Oh, no. Stadiums, even Bryant-Denny Stadium, of course I guess it was Denny Stadium back then, but it was, what'd you say, 50,000, about
56,000, yeah.
Yeah, what's interesting that year playing down in Tampa, we went down Tampa, and there was the coach Bradshaw was on the team, and he says, they've got a nose guard. We don't think he's any good. We're going to challenge him. We're going to challenge him. Well, sort of a backup. Richard Baker, and Evan Hyde, they took all our jerseys, all our uniforms down, had them in the locker room. Somebody broke into the locker room, stole all of our jerseys.
In Tampa.
So in Tampa. So for what they did, we wound up wearing practice jerseys for the games that we had on, that we'd worn on Fridays.
Wow.
So anyways, we go in, it's raining, it's a messy night. and Freddie Solomon's their quarterback.
Mhm.
He wound up playing pro ball.
Yeah,
But
for the
this guy,
49ers as a wide
I think
receiver.
he was
Yeah.
receiver. Yep. And so, anyways, we go down there, and this guy that was playing nose guard wasn't very good. His sister hadn't seen him play. He's a senior. His sister hadn't seen him play, and she came. She'd been sick. She'd been sick, and finally she got to come see him play, and he was so excited. He makes the first like 4 or 5 tackles unassisted. Have you ever heard of a guy named John Matusak?
Yeah.
That's who it was. He
Pretty
was
pretty good player.
he was the nose guard that they wanted to challenge, and he did a good job of stopping us. But anyways, that was just an aside, I guess, in that year.
Well, fast forward a few years, Batuzak plays for John Madden, of course, with the Oakland Raiders,
Yes.
Super Bowl champs. Vanderbilt's Pat Toomey ends up being a teammate of his for a
Oh, that's
season or
right.
two out in Oakland.
I remember that. Tell you what, Bernard, I'm impressed with your history of the school. You know it very well.
Well, I have a lot of conversations. Let's put
I
it
was
that
going to
way. But
say,
thank you for that comment. Fred, let's take you to the 74 season a little bit. Let's take us to becoming not just bowl eligible, but when did you guys learn that you had been selected for the Peach Bowl? But that was also the year you beat Florida and Ole Miss, but tied Tennessee at the end of the season. So any memories right in there? Love to hear anything that
yeah.
comes to mind.
Well, as I mentioned before, we changed our offense. We ran a pro style type offense my sophomore year. Played 11 games. My junior year, ran the veer, and I think it was against Florida about our fourth or fifth game. I don't know if you have the schedule there or not, but I ran the veer, and the guy hit me pretty hard on the outside. And I went, man, that something doesn't feel right. And I went to try and throw, and it was like somebody stuck an ice pick in my shoulder. And needless to say, I had a partial separation, and David Lee came in and played really well. I think he may have gotten SEC Player of the Week that week. He's from Florida, and they were fired up to beat Florida, and we did. So that was a great, great win. Then we wound up, let's see, Georgia. Georgia was a wild game. It was one of those back and forth. I believe Georgia may have won 38-31, something like that.
They did.
It was a 38-31, something like that. And then after that, we beat Ole Miss. I came back and helped work with David. David and I both played in that game. Beat Ole Miss, beat Army,
Mhm.
and I'm trying to think. I don't know who else. If you're looking at the schedule, who else we?
Got smoked by Kentucky at Kentucky.
Yes, I had surgery after Army. They separated my shoulder, so I had surgery the Monday of that Kentucky week,
Mhm.
and it was not a good game by any means. I think they were mad because I think if I make that may be right, we may have been selected at that time to go to the Peach Bowl, and they thought they should have been going.
Wow,
I think
that early. Wow.
I think so, because when was that? How many? Okay,
That game
Kentucky
was
had been.
November 9th. That was the eighth game of the season, November
No,
9th.
well, I was wrong then. I was thinking maybe I tell you what happened. I think they got upset that they beat us and they didn't go to the Peach Bowl.
Well,
We did.
yeah.
Maybe that's what I was.
Yeah.
I remember there's something like I think we wound up getting the actual invite. It must have been right. Probably was at the end of the season like they do now after the UT.
Well, you beat Tulane the next week,
Yes.
but this is kind of curious. You go to Louisville and you play at Fairgrounds Stadium in front of 8,900 people.
That was up there. There's sort of a strange stadium too.
I was going to say in Louisville, I don't know how old their football program is, but they were terrible that year. Y'all won 44-0.
Yeah.
But
We had
I guess they were still basketball school.
Yes, yeah, very much. And really, that was run that veer. We had a great offense that year, passing, running, and everything. We had the total offense for this team. It was really good. And then you talk about Tennessee game. It was just one of those games. I was out and had screw in my shoulder, but we had Tennessee down at about 8 points.
Mhm.
And late in the fourth quarter, it was raining, which is a typical miserable UT game. It was typically, it always was raining and cold in November. The ball went through Barry Burton's hands. The Tennessee recovered it, scored a touchdown, and and had a 2-point conversion to tie us. I believe, what was
Yeah.
that, 20? Was it 20 to 20?
21-21.
21-21.
Yeah, and then the next month you guys go to Atlanta and you play in the Peach Bowl, and then for the second consecutive week or a game, you tie. So the season ends 7-3-2.
Right.
But when you guys learned about going to the Peach Bowl, how exciting was that for the team, for the
Oh, that
program?
was great. I mean, it's so fantastic. Bowl game. It's just something, not since the Gator Bowl
Mm-hmm.
that Vanderbilt had been to a bowl game. We were
Yeah,
really
been
excited.
19 years. Yep.
Yes. And we were all excited about hearing about, hey, what kind of presents we might get, all the nice Peach Bowl watch, that sort of thing. And it was a lot of fun. We really enjoyed it. And one of the things that was rather interesting, though, we were in a quarterback meeting. Myself, David Lee, and David Culley.
David Culley,
David
yeah.
Culley. We
Mhm.
were all in a meeting together, and Coach Sloan came in, and it looked like he had something on his mind. You could tell. And David said something like, "Hey, what's something on Coach Sloan's mind? I don't know what it is, but he sure looks like he's thinking about something." Well, what happened was we played Texas Tech in the Peach Bowl.
Mhm.
Texas Tech coach Jim Carlin left Texas Tech to go coach at South Carolina.
Mhm.
So at that time, they had contacted Coach Sloan about being the coach at Texas Tech
Mhm.
before the game. Even though he was coaching against them, they were contacting him about coming down and being there replacing Coach Carlin.
And fast forward to 1990, 91, DiNardo leaves us and goes to LSU right after we played LSU or something
That's
like
right.
that. Yeah.
That's interesting. That's right. I remember that now.
Yeah. Um, had Van Heflin made the campus at that point, or was he
No,
still a year or two off?
he was still back. I think he's probably about 2 or 3 years further back.
I wasn't sure if he and Coach Cully, David Cully, were in the same program, or the program at the same time or not.
I think David may have finished up before Van got there.
Mhm.
That would be my guess.
Mhm. Some fabulous athletes, some great
Oh,
quarterbacks, that's for
oh
sure.
yes.
Fred, I want to step away from football and those experiences. I want to talk about life in Nashville, life on campus from somebody who's from Nashville. Did you live on campus during your years, or did you commute from home, or how did that work out?
No, I stayed my freshman year. I commuted a lot. I just personally, the dorms down there, they weren't the best, and I just sort of I'd stay there and commute and back and forth.
Mhm.
My sophomore, junior, and senior year, I lived on campus in Carmichael Towers.
Wait, you're telling me that Branscombe Quadrangle was not to your liking back in the
Well,
day?
no, I wasn't in Branscombe. We were down there. God, we were
Oh,
down there in the ones down on 21st and West End.
oh, toward the south, the north end of the campus.
Yes, yes.
Oh, yeah, those were like World War II
That's what I'm
barracks.
saying. They weren't exactly what you would think as being an acceptable dorm, but it was okay. But I was there, and sometimes at home, sometimes back there. But my sophomore, junior, senior year, was in Carmichael Towers and enjoyed that. That was.
Rest in peace. The towers are no
I
longer.
know, man.
Now they
They're all
have these.
imploded. They're
Yeah.
imploded.
Oh, you're right, Kenny. Kassam Quadrangle is what we were thinking of.
Yes.
But now they have these beautiful, wonderful dorms. And I read recently that I think maybe next summer, I may have my timetable wrong, that Branscombe is being torn down and new dorms are being, uh,
Really.
yeah. So all buildings must go at some point, I guess.
I tell you what, these new ones they replaced them with are very well. You tell they put some dollars into those. I mean, they are very nice. They're very
Well, at
very gothic.
91, Fred, at 90 plus thousand a year for the full freight, they better be supporting some good buildings on campus, that's for sure.
You're exactly right, Bernard. That's for sure. Exactly. But
Well,
but you were asking sort of it's interesting. Being on campus. It's funny. Went to high school on West End.
mhm,
Uh, went to college on West End.
mhm,
I've worked on West End probably 2/3 of my business time. I
mhm.
used to live off of West End for about 30 years, and now I'm just, I got a little bit away from that, but still my office right over there where I am is still on West End, right there, West End, Murphy
Well,
Road.
well, Fred, this is coming out of respect from your friends and family. Why do you still try to make a left-hand turn onto West End and you're not at a traffic light? You know that doesn't happen. You can't
Where's
make
that?
left-hand turns.
No, no, no. Traffic's not not your friend when you do it, unless you got a light. If I got to go find a light.
That's right. Well, how popular was the Fisher household on holidays, Thanksgiving, spring break, or getaway weekends when y'all didn't have a game? How many people would y'all host? How many players would come over from time to time?
We had a few. It's hard to think about what, I'd have some friends and bring them around the house and everything. But we had a lot. What's really interesting, a lot of those guys, we had some alums or, some fans that would take groups of guys and do that. In fact, I'd go to their place a lot of times, that they would have cook steaks or, have just a little gatherings. And it was a lot of fun. Our team was very, very close. And, how we saw that, we had talked, Bernard, and about 3 weeks ago.
Mhm,
In fact, it was maybe it was a South Carolina
mhm,
homecoming game.
mhm.
We were back in town, or everybody came back in town, and we had the 50th reunion of the Peach Bowl team, and it was fantastic. Vanderbilt did a really good job. We had dinner over at the Lowe's Hotel.
Mhm.
Wonderful, great dinner, but it was so much fun with seeing all the guys and their family, their wives. And what's hard to believe is, Bernard, I hadn't seen a lot of those guys in 50 years, but it would have been like I hadn't seen them in a week. I mean, everybody saw each other. Of course, the funny thing was we had to look at each other's name tags a little bit, make sure who we were talking to. But I mean, what I was so proud of is all the guys of what they did with their Vanderbilt degree and where they've gone in business. I'd asked them about their business, what they were doing, and it was great. It was so wonderful.
And I bet the weekend just flew by and there wasn't enough time.
It did
Yeah.
exactly because we went over there to the tailgate and then we got to sit together at the game and went down at halftime to get presented. It was a very, very wonderful weekend.
Well, I'll give props to Candace, to George Smith, Javon Marshall, all the folks over at the different departments at McGugan and in the athletics department, because what they're doing is they're bringing back into the fold and making welcome all these players and teams that historically may not have felt that they were welcome back on campus or on Jess Neely. And I love that they're bringing back just anybody and everybody who wants to be part of it. And Coach Lee has said this many, many times that the program belongs to the football alums. McGugan is open anytime that anybody wants to come and see how the program's doing, spend some time with him, watching the team, even working out if you so choose. But I love all of what they're doing, and I knew they had recognized your Peach Bowl team, and I bet that was a special occasion.
It was, and they also talked about with Coach Sloan, being our coach and also developing a scholarship in
Mhm.
his honor. So we're working on that, and it was just, but like I said, it was a really a neat time. I wasn't too sure how it was going to work out, but like I said, after I haven't seen somebody so long, but there are a lot of guys I still see, here in Nashville or around and about, but seeing some of the guys that came in town was a real, real, real treat.
I bet a flood of memories came back when you saw certain guys, because here is a common theme that I have learned over these almost 5 years, Fred, that I've been doing this, is that almost to a man, their greatest memories about being at Vanderbilt and playing football and being on campus is the camaraderie in the locker room, the brotherhood, the shared memories, good or bad. And it takes you back, if you really think about this, it takes all of us, takes each of us back to a more innocent time of our lives. We're 18-year-old or 17-year-old knuckleheads when we get to campus, uh, no matter how smart you are, no matter how mature you are, we're all knuckleheads, we're athletes. But over those 3, 4, 5 years, however long it takes you to matriculate through, hopefully you gain a little wisdom, some memories, some lifelong friendships. And they always tell me this, and see if this resonates with you. You see one of your teammates you know his nickname from back in the day, and that's what you call him. You don't call him by his given name. It's the nickname. And two, within a minute or two, you remember something that's just memorable involving him and you and maybe some others, and it immediately puts a smile on your face, and you probably even chat about it or laugh about it.
Well, we did. You're exactly right. So you're right on, and we had the best times of just say, hey, I remember this. Hey, remember what happened? We did this. How this worked? What went on? And it was you're exactly right. One of the things, it's really funny. I was sitting here thinking about when you were just talking, and one of the things is I know two things. One, if you remember pre-spring, right?
Mhm.
Pre-spring in the I guess it was in McGugin in the basketball indoor basketball area. We used to go in there, and they had man, we had sweats on, and they work you out hard in pre-spring. A lot of games, a lot of things that you don't necessarily think can really bring a team together.
Yeah.
But pre-spring and even spring practice was a time when I think it brought everybody together. I thought pre-spring was to give the coaches something to do personally. I didn't know if it was but really it was a time I think that brought a lot of the players really, really well together.
Mhm.
One time I remember my sophomore was my freshman, end of my freshman year, going into my sophomore year. In pre-spring they had boxing day, put the gloves on and go box. And we were the last group coming in. I'd heard about guys that had broken jaws and broken noses and, all cut up and everything just
Oh my God.
because you had to go in there and if people get sucker punched or whatever, go whoever fights to do it. Well, anyways, my partner that I had was Ed Oaks. He was a quarterback as well that year, and I was a freshman. He was my partner, and I'm going to tell you something. Ed Oaks, a great guy, tougher than wet leather, from Coleman, Alabama,
Huh?
and Pumpkin Patterson, who was the line coach. As soon as we get finished, ready for boxing, he yells out the name Oaks. I went, oh boy, I'll go over and get my gloves on. And I've got these gloves on, my lights flashing in front of my eyes, thinking, oh man, I want to take Ed, I'm going to take him on.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, the door slings open at the end of McGugin in the gym in there. And you hear this coach Sloan, coaches, take those gloves off my quarterbacks. I don't want them hitting each other. He took the gloves off. We practiced setups, 5 foot, five
Yeah,
step,
yeah, yeah,
three
yeah.
step, 5 step, 7 step drops, watching all those guys beat themselves up. And I don't think they appreciate that, but I sure appreciate Coach Sloan
Yeah,
coming.
I was gonna say you didn't make many friends that day.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, we had, I'm gonna call this in the 80s a little more civilized version of what you just described, except we called it basket brawl. And it
Wow.
took place, you remember the indoor gym in Magoogan that had the
Oh, yeah.
track above it?
Yes.
We used to have 3-on-3 games of basket brawl. And it was typically, and guys, correct me if I'm wrong, a guy who weighed over 250, a guy who weighed under 250, and a guy who weighed under 200. That made up a team. So the little guys, they didn't want to get anywhere near the big guys because there were elbows and asses and everything else in between being thrown. Because if you won, you didn't have to do as much conditioning as the team that lost. So it was just a little bit more civilized, but it still was
Wow.
pretty tough.
Well, Bill Parcells was the defensive coordinator, came in with Coach Sloan.
Mhm.
And he told one of the trainers, I want you to go get me about 4 buckets, big old buckets, and fill them with sand.
Mhm.
They went, really? What's that for? Well, you know what that's for. When
Mhm.
guys get sick, that's where they go to in those buckets. And he said,
Kenny Cole just commented that they had 55-gallon buckets for that same purpose set up during his
yeah,
workouts. Yep.
that's right. That's right. Those coaches thought ahead of time on that. We had a
Oh,
funny, we had a funny thing. I'm gonna say anything necessarily out of line, but we had a fellows on our team. He was a nice guy, a good guy, but he's from Massachusetts.
mhm.
I don't know if we ever. I think his name may have been Dan, but we called him Massachusetts. So he was. He was like a walk on that came on,
Mhm.
and Parcells I think did not want Massachusetts on the team. And
Mhm.
so what happened was, and they did these drills where you go out there and wave drills, and you break down the coach, do monkey rolls and everything in the gym. And Tom Galbeers,
Mhm.
Mark Fritz in Massachusetts were all in there on the same thing. 3 of them doing the monkey rolls and all these drills, wave drills, break down the coach, and then you go back around. Well, he did it the first time, and Parcells goes, Massachusetts, you messed it up. And I hope if Massachusetts is hearing this, I'm not making fun of him. He was a great guy, but it's amazing. It's just another one of those stories.
Yeah.
And anyways, he broke down on him. And he said, "Oh, Massachusetts, you messed it up. Go do it again." So if you do it once, you're worn out. Second time, do it again. Said, "Massachusetts, you messed it up." And Tom got up here and said, "If you mess it up again, Massachusetts, again, we're going to kill you." The third time, they went in there and did the drills, wave drills, and everything. When you break down on the coach, Tom, you had to run your legs and break down on the coach. Said, Massachusetts ran past Parcells out the door. We never saw him again. We
Oh my gosh.
never saw him again. So,
Oh wow.
so those pre-spring was a tough time too.
Yeah. Yeah, those winter workouts were they were meant to do a couple of things, and then sometimes it achieved kind of cutting away some of the guys who didn't want to tough it out. We've got just a few more minutes, Fred, and I sure
Yeah.
appreciate all these stories and you sharing some of your history and memories. I want to talk about the modern game, the modern team, and Coach Lee. I'm a big fan. Everybody who knows me knows that I'm a big fan of what Coach Lee's doing and had a monumental historic win against Bama and all that this year. But I would never want to be a coach in the modern game with all of this wild, wild west transfer portal, NIL. I don't see how they do it because you're rebuilding your team almost every year. Now, when you played and when I played, if you wanted to transfer, you set out a minimum of 1 year, and if it was in the conference, I think it was 2 years.
Was. Yeah.
So the balance of, and here's my question, the balance of power seems to be shifting to the players. I'm all for them getting paid, make no mistake about that. But it just seems like, to me, it's just way out of whack when you read a headline, and I'm not criticizing this kid, the outstanding freshman defensive end for South Carolina re-ups or renegotiates for a $1.5 million deal, so he's coming back to South Carolina. That's a 19 or 20-year-old who's making more money than his defensive coordinator who he's in the room with.
Oh yeah.
I don't get that.
It's let's put it this way. I wish, and Bernard, you probably say, but I wish we ran the offense they're running now. I'd run those shotguns and stay back in the pockets and those flare passes, and the offense Vanderbilt runs right now. With it's definitely the run pass option, but even more is very effective. It's a very, very good offense. That and just being able to stand back in the pocket and work that way. Well, I love that kind of offense. Sure. Now you look at the probably one go down as one of the greatest coaches in America's history, Nick Saban. He and his wife, when he's out there recruiting these kids, he is of the school that says, "I'm going to give you a great school to come to, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to get an education so you can do something with yourself when you graduate. Hopefully you play pro ball, but the percentages are not in your favor. So I want you to have something to fall back on." And he was commenting and saying when he was recruiting these guys, kids would walk up to him and say, "Coach, man, I'd love to play ball at Alabama. I want to get there and get a good education." All that. They walk up and say, "How much are you going to pay me?" And his wife finally, Terry, I guess her name, I think it's her name.
It is.
Came and said, "We've had enough of this. We don't need to do this anymore. This is just not the way it is." Now, I agree. Being a coach right now, Clark Lee with what he's doing, I mean, he's got a great year now and he's got some players playing. The question comes back, all of a sudden these other schools are going to note those guys. Are they going to come in here and offer them a lot of money? How does it stop, and where do you even begin? And your team, the hard thing too is for the fans, because all of a sudden it's like one and done a lot of times. You just don't know who's playing, who's the fan, who can you cheer for, how do you know these guys, and all of a sudden they're finished and gone. And now, as far as the money being paid, what I really think the NCAA, they need to shut the portal down. The portal, I mean, it's fine for the players, but it maybe say you can only transfer once. None of this 2, 3, 4 times or whatever. But the other thing is where I think where the courts and the NCAA missed it is that I feel like the players should be paid. Back when I was playing, we had a $15 a month laundry check. Of course, Coach Sloan used to advertise Ireland steak and biscuits for $1.49, each. So, it's all relative.
Yeah.
But as much money has gone through TV revenues and everything else within the NCAA, I feel like and I'm just throwing this number out, just an example, possibly each school, whether you're at Vanderbilt, Alabama, Tennessee State, Texas Tech, uh, Tennessee Tech, wherever it is, that through the NCAA, you'd be paid, say, $2,000 a month or whatever it is, while you're in school and while you're still playing ball. Okay, to everybody, it's all even. Then what would have been done is this likeness. It's to say, okay, and this is what I thought it was originally supposed to be. If you go to the Vanderbilt bookstore or Tennessee bookstore or whatever, if you go to a game and they're selling your jersey with your name on it or a poster with your face on it, whatever else it is, that you would get a cut of that revenue that came from that. So therefore, everybody's getting paid the same. Then you get an override on the other. But what's happened now is what used to be done under the table now is legal. And so the schools that have the big, big, big pockets are going to continue to get great players. And what happens there is you get some guys, they still pay them some money. And like you said, they have a good year. Hey, I want more next year. And what happens if the player is there and he gets paid that $1 million, he don't have a good year? Does that mean that they take that NIL money or lower it? I haven't heard that.
No, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
You've got a quarterback at Western Kentucky, TJ Finley.
Okay.
He's been at Auburn, LSU, and one of the Texas schools. So he's now been at 4 programs, and he's back in the portal. Potentially 5 Division I programs in 5 or 6 years. And I'm not criticizing him. I'm just pointing out that's the system now.
I know it's interesting because you see a lot of these guys, you think, man, they've almost got grandchildren by the time they graduate, because you sit here, back when we played, you had 5 years to play 4 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And that clock started as soon as you entered the school.
Yeah.
So, they did that for a redshirt year, injury year, something like that. And COVID sure changed. I don't know how long that COVID rule is going to run, or if it stopped. With
I
the
think
players.
there's one more academic calendar year.
Is it
I
okay?
think they're done with that. I think
That'd be good. That's another problem for coaches. Who do you keep? How long do you keep them there? You keep them on scholarship. How does this work? And it's tough.
Well, that's a Barton Simmons responsibility. That's his issue as general manager of the program, along with Earl Bennett. We'll pause that conversation and let the real professionals tell us how it's going to play out over the next 60, 90 days with our roster. But Fred, I've been wanting to have you on the show well before we actually got to meet, and I'm so glad we've been able to spend this time this evening. So thank you for making some time. I know that we're during the holiday season. It's not easy sometimes finding an hour or so.
Well, Bernard, I do appreciate it. And if you ever get tired of being an attorney, maybe you need to talking to ESPN. You do a great job and you make it very easy. Thank you.
Well, I sure appreciate it. These conversations are easy. It's fun. It's, as I tell folks, it's a labor of love that I'll do this until the last Commodore doesn't want to have a conversation. So we're going to keep going. We've got another one next week, and we'll keep going. But guys, if you haven't ordered your bowl tickets, you got to do it immediately. Vanderbilt's already sold out our allotment. They're having to go back to the bowl folks to ask for more tickets. Other than that, if you can't get them through the university's ticket allotment, you're going to have to find them on the secondary market, or maybe be able to get them through the bowl, the Birmingham Bowl folks who sell tickets. I'm not sure all that works, but we're going to have us a good time on the 26th and 27th. So I hope that as many folks can come down. I know it's right after Christmas, so maybe it'd be a good break for a couple of days. It's a Friday game leading into a weekend, but I hope everybody has a good holiday season, and we'll see you next week. And again, thank you, Fred.
Thank you, Bernard. Yeah, thank you down.